going to talk about a topic. I want to give a little bit of the cringeworthy thing because it's a topic that I think needs to be talked about more than it usually is, but most people don't want to talk about it. Anything, but so much in our homes. I hate to say, I've done so many shows on is your home killing you? And there's so many toxic metals that are in our home, and there's so much exposure that we don't think about.
Welcome to the Jennifer J Hammond podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
Hello, it's Jennifer J Hammond. And I'm so excited with Phyllis Mulhall today. And we're going to talk about a topic. I want to give a little bit of the cringeworthy thing because it's a topic that I think needs to be talked about more than it usually is, but most people don't want to talk about it. Anything, but so much in our homes. I hate to say, I've done so many shows on is your home killing you? And there's so many toxic metals that are in our home, and there's so much exposure that we don't think about. So first of all, I wanted Douglas, if you'll share just a little bit about your background, and then let's dive into toxic metals.
Yeah, sure, Jennifer. Some people know me from your shows before, but the only thing that really people need to know about me for this purpose is that I've spent the past few decades advising designers on how to keep these toxic metals out of products. So the Institute that I still work with today and that I used to manage developed a methodology for creating healthy products that keep these heavy metals out, and that is recognized by the US EPA today. So we really pioneered a lot of the toxicology behind analyzing these and getting the lead out, so to speak. So that's my background. I'm also a science journalist. I've published a couple of books, but the key thing is that background on the toxicology related to consumer products and buildings.
Yeah. And so even from where you work, if you're working in a commercial building and not working from home, but also your home. And so starting with toxic metals, so they're bad for you. And even we can talk a little bit about the American Heart Association. They have a statement that's come out about even the low levels of the toxic metals have a major risk for heart disease. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. And as I say, heavy metal is much more than a rock band. And it needs to be taken seriously. And until the American Heart Association came out with this, a lot of healthcare providers were dismissing these low levels as, voodoo science, alternative medicine stuff. Well, guess what? Everything has changed because recently, as you said, the American Heart Association has come out with an official scientific statement that declares low levels of toxic metals to be major heart disease risks. And I want to emphasize, these are not just heart disease risks, but they're also carcinogenic. They trigger cancer because they destroy DNA in the cell and they cause mutations. So they're both carcinogenic, mutagenic, and they are pro-inflammatory. So they're just bad all around. And unfortunately, veterans and military personnel have been especially exposed to these, but not just that. Also, consumers are exposed to them, and we're all exposed to them. This is what the AHA statement says. Everybody is exposed to these. Everybody has these inside them, and that's because they are everywhere. They've been around for millions and billions of years. They were around when Earth was created, and they include things like lead, cadmium, and arsenic, which are the three metals that were identified in the American Heart Association statement, but also many, many more: gadolinium, tin, chromium, you name it. Depleted uranium, which is going to be particularly interesting, of course, for military personnel. And the reason that these are called heavy is simply because scientifically they're 5 times more dense than water. So there's no magic to that, but that's why they're called heavy metals. And so from both a consumer point of view and a veteran's point of view, this is critical. And the AHA also said, and I would like to emphasize this, most standard healthcare providers don't know how to test, diagnose, or treat these metals. They're having to learn this. Having said that, a number of integrative cardiologists, including one of the doctors, he's not a cardiologist, but one of the doctors who works with the military, who co-authored an article with me, they know how to test for these, and so do naturopathic doctors and alternative physicians. So there's a pretty wide range of practitioners out there today, but it's all change for standard healthcare. And it's going to take a while for the so-called standard of care to catch up with this. But in the meantime, there's a lot that people can do to prevent this, and also to get themselves tested.
And I think interesting with the houses, with the buying and selling of houses and where you live. And again, like I said, is your house killing you? Are there things inside your house? I mean, we have the air pollution, we have soil pollution, we have water pollution. We have a lot of things that, again, when people are even trying to purchase a house and they're trying to look at, comparing one house to another house, and again, trying to figure out which one's healthy. We've done this even with energy, which one has the better energy efficient home. And sometimes, and it relates to this in that I've also seen sometimes when you have a brand new house, it's so sealed, so tight, and then there's the off gassing, and nothing can actually get out of the house. So it's not that you need a brand new car or a brand new house. I use it similar in the fact, but to talk about air pollution, soil pollution, water pollution, what can people do to, one, be aware, and number two, to make good decisions when it comes to those?
Well, that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to help people become aware of what these metals are, why they are hidden stresses. And that's the subtitle of the book. I mean, it's discovering the nature of longevity, restoring the heart and body by targeting hidden stress. These are hidden stresses. You don't feel them, you can't sense them. And so in the book, I really describe what exactly they are and what they do to you and what you can do about them. And on that score, there's a really simple thing that everybody can do. And I want to emphasize again, for veterans, this is also possible in military facilities and at home. And that is, change your filters. The filters in air conditioners and furnaces are designed to protect the equipment. They're not designed to protect your lungs. And so there are a lot of much higher quality filters out there that you can get from your air conditioning provider or at the local Home Depot. They're called HEPA filters. And especially if there's been a wildfire nearby, switch out all your filters, including in your vehicle. So by doing this simple thing, you can go a long way towards protecting you and your family. And I want to emphasize, children and people with diabetes are especially vulnerable to this. Children, because their cells are dividing more quickly as they're growing up, and that when the metals interfere with their DNA, that's a huge problem. And diabetes, it's really interesting because guess what? Anyone who has diabetes know you have to watch your glucose levels. Well, guess what heavy metals do to glucose? They oxidize it. And so no one wants to have oxidized glycation products running around their system. And the reason we know that that is happening is because when diabetic heart patients were actually treated for this and the heavy metals were removed from their tissue, guess what? They got better. There was a 41% reduction in all causes of mortality. So that's how we know that it's bad for diabetics, and the treatment is especially good for diabetics. So number one, change out all the filters in your house, including in your vacuum cleaner, by the way. Otherwise, you're just pushing the dust around the house. Number two, do the same thing with your water filters, especially from your tap, and make sure that the water filters are certified for toxic metals. This is really, really important. And number three, actually, there are some foods that you can prepare I'll just mention one right now, and that is broccoli sprouts. So broccoli sprouts are 100 times more effective at chelating or grabbing these metals out of your tissue, and then you excrete it in your urine. Very simple. Well, it's actually quite complicated, but that's the way it happens. And so that's something you can do. You can grow these sprouts in your kitchen in a couple of days. So there's lots and lots that people can do to protect themselves. Having said that, this stuff is still getting into everyone, and that's why people need to inform them about the tests and the therapies for getting this stuff out of you as well.
Well, and one of the things I wanted to also go back and just emphasize, because sometimes we miss it especially if we go too fast. So let's talk a little bit more about metal-related health effects. So from the respiratory, the pains, the hypertension, the immune, talk about those metal-related health effects.
Yeah, all of the above, for the simple reason that these toxic metals are pro-inflammatory, and everybody knows that when you get chronic inflammation, what happens is your body is really good at using inflammation to get you out of trouble in the short run when you got a wound or something like that. That's what it's designed to do, is clean up the mess. If it's chronic and the damage is chronic, which is the case with heavy metals, guess what? That inflammatory response never goes away, and your body turns against you. It's actually a defect in the way that we're built. It's a strange kind of thing, but your body is not well adapted to long-term chronic insults and injuries. And that's what happens with these heavy metals. So you're getting this chronic inflammation all the time, plus you're getting this chronic DNA damage that is leading to the production of cancer cells that can eventually overwhelm your immune system. So bad, bad, bad. You know, you don't want to have this stuff in you. And it's been made worse. And I just want to give an example from the military again. And that is that people, and also not just the military, people on shooting ranges, you know, the stuff that comes out the back of the gun, that puff of smoke, that shoots back, that is full of lead, because the propellant actually pushes against the lead bullet pushes against the propellant, and some of that lead comes out. That's why shooting ranges are contaminated with lead. So that's a real problem. And there's lots of other environments where people are exposed to this.
So also, you had sent me some information on the shareholders sued Verizon and AT&T for share value losses resulting from failure to report that thousands of installers had been exposed to lead shielding. So talk a little bit about that. That was the Wall Street Journal also broke that story.
Okay. So there's a myth out there. The myth is that we've gotten lead out of our products. We haven't. Of course, it used to be in leaded gasoline, and anyone who was around when there was lead in gasoline still has it in them. But today, a lot of consumer products still have lead in them. In the European Union, they found that 60% of all products imported into the EU actually contained unacceptable levels of lead. So this is not out of our products by any stretch of the imagination. What the Wall Street Journal found was that thousands and thousands of miles of telecom cables are coated in lead. And these are outdoors. They're leaching into our water systems and into our soil. And of course, the telecom companies have been rapid to come back and say, well, it's not as bad as people say. But actually, the consumer organizations have been saying, no, actually, it is as bad as they say. And the problem is that this wasn't in SEC filings. And so the shareholders got upset because when this story came out, the stock took a dive. And now they've launched a legal suit. But the key thing is that this unearthed a sad fact, and that is that a lot of our products that we're using in everyday life still have got lead in them.
Yeah, I know there was also the Consumer Reports found that, of course, the high levels of lead in popular baby foods and snacks.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? And it's not just baby food snacks, it's baby foods and snacks that adults eat. So this has been going on for years. They did a study 5 years ago that found this, and they found after 5 years, the levels have slightly decreased, but it's nowhere near where it should be. And it's way above what is considered to be acceptable. Imagine we're feeding lead tainted baby food to our kids? You got to be
Oh,
kidding me. And yet here we have a very authoritative organization. And Jennifer, I want to emphasize, this isn't voodoo science. This is the American Heart Association, Consumer Reports. These are well-recognized institutions, the Wall Street Journal, and these guys don't often get it wrong. So we've got lots of different authoritative sources. And by the way, the Wall Street Journal is quite a, like right wing, they're owned by the guys who own Fox. So it's coming from all sides of the spectrum, not just one place.
and I think it's really important to know that something can be done about it. You mentioned earlier that, you can go see a doctor and you can get tested for it. And as you mentioned before, changing the filters, whether it's, for your air conditioning, again, something so simple like your vacuum cleaner, I think so often people forget about. And even your water filter. A lot of times people just buy the simplest water filter
Yeah.
and they don't think about it. I just recently I had a conversation with my sister because she had moved down to Florida, and she said, "Oh, the water's so different than it was up in Denver." And I said, "Well, did you get a water filter for your shower?" And it was so interesting because she said, "I never thought about that." And I was like,
Yeah. Well, we've
well,
got a central filtration system where the water comes in. So, and, yes, okay, they can cost a fair amount of money, but it's nothing compared to the copay when you get sick. So
right.
just think of that when you get sticker shock from looking at these filtration systems. Don't worry about it. This is an investment in you and your children and your family to prevent them from getting sick. And Jennifer, I just want to bring up one thing that shows what happens when this stuff is when you're damaged. So here on this side of the picture is elastic fiber in your skin and arteries in a 6-year-old. This is the elastic fiber in a 90-year-old. Some of that damage is being created by these heavy metals. You don't want to go there. Okay, so this is like the visible example of what goes on. This is an electron microscope of the elastin fiber that drives every breath you take, every move you make, and all the blood flow in your arteries. So there's a concrete example of what's going on.
Wow. I mean, I think it's so important to be able to one, have a why. So often people start to get sick and they don't understand. That's one of the reasons I asked you to kind of talk a little bit about the symptoms, the things that, again, people try to treat the symptom rather than going back and finding out what is the core of what's happening here and what is the source it's coming from.
Exactly. I told my doctor about this. I told her about the AHA announcement, and she said, "Yeah, we'll have to wait until it becomes standard of care." What?
Oh,
I mean, this is the
ouch.
response at this point. And sorry, I didn't answer your question before. So when you go to someone who knows how to test for this, the normal blood test that sometimes your doctor will do if they expect that, there's an imbalance of metals in your blood, don't work for this. And this was proven in a 10-year, in a clinical trial and a clinical study that was done in 2017 that showed clearly that the standard blood tests absolutely do not show this. So you need to have what's known as a provocation test or a challenge test. Again, the standard medical people will say, "Oh, that's nonsense. There's no standard for these provocation tests, so they really don't work." Well, they did work in the chelation studies that were, by the way, financed by the National Institutes of Health. So yes, there are these tests. No, don't accept a blood test because the metals are in your tissue. Okay, they're not in your blood, and so that's why they don't show up. It's like a no-brainer that they lodge in your tissue. They don't lodge in your blood. They're not running around as much in your body. And as for therapy, aside from the foods that I've been talking about, and there's more, there is this chelation therapy that was like oh, that's voodoo science and that doesn't really work. And, you hear this from standard practitioners all the time. Well, they're not up on the science. There was a 10-year NIH financed $35 million clinical trial that proved that it's safe and it's especially effective, as I mentioned earlier, in diabetic heart patients. Then in 2017, a small group of cardiac patients who were going to lose their feet to amputation got better when these heavy metals were taken out of them in very high amounts, like 6,000% in some cases above baseline. So, if someone tells you, no, this doesn't work, which, by the way, is what the NIH guys had the study for. They had the study to prove it didn't work, and boy, were they surprised when it did. So they were, standard caregivers who now are whistling a different tune. And those are the caregivers that you need to look for. And I want to emphasize one other thing. I'm not a physician. You have to listen to your doctor, but if your doctor's telling you this is nonsense, I think it's a good idea to go for a second opinion.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to make sure, we wanted to invite people to share their stories. So email, follow up with however you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on YouTube or your favorite podcast. We would love to have your stories. And I hate to say the good and the bad. We want to hear the stories because the more we can get the awareness out there, that's how we all learn is sharing our stories and not staying silent and suffering in silence. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we had Douglas on again, to make sure that we're aware of this, especially when we're buying and selling houses, because where we live, they're just amazing, simple things that we can do to change how healthy our house is so that it is not hurting us. So we have a healthy house, not a house that's hurting us. So Douglas, talk about where they can find your book and any other website, social media you want to share.
Sure. First of all, I want to reemphasize, send your story to Jennifer and she'll share them with me. This is really important, especially for veterans, but for everybody. And so anybody who has any experience with these metals, we would really like to hear it, because people need to demand action. This is the only way that we're going to get this into standard medical care. And that is what the spokesperson for the American Medical Association has said as well, who, by the way, wrote the foreword to my book, which is Discovering the Nature of Longevity, Restoring the Heart and Body by Targeting Hidden Stress. You can buy it on Amazon right now. It's number 1 on the bestseller list and has been for quite a while, so it's generating a lot of interest. You can go to the website and there's more information on things like wildfires, elastic fiber, and the things that we talked about here today. And the website is www.natureoflongevity.com. That's natureoflongevity, all one word, .com. But get the book. And I'm not saying that just to sell books. It's because I wrote this to give people the information that they need in order to be able to make informed decisions and take this information to their doctor. My doctor's bought the book. And a lot of physicians that I know have purchased the book. So give one to your physician and say, please read this.
Well, and as you know, I'm always looking for hope. So I'm going to ask you to lift your voice and say yay with me as we go off the air. Okay?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Yay! Make sure to send your story to Jennifer.
Send your stories. Send your stories.
Hi, I'm Jack